freeze dryer really give you the results that justify that price tag? I mean, because, well, that's what we all want to know, right? So, in this video, I'm going to share what I've recently freeze dried. And that includes raw and cooked meat, fresh fruits, herbs, and more. And then I'm going to give you some considerations so that, well, you can decide for yourself. Because honestly, I thought that a freeze dryer was something that I could never justify using. And that's because I already use canning, fermenting, freezing, dehydrating, so, I mean, what would be the point? Exactly, but stick with me, because first, I want to show you what this device looks like and how it functions, then take you inside of my kitchen and show you the results you can expect with freeze drying regular items from your garden or the grocery store, then help you to decide where you might land. But don't just listen to me, because I always find the comments and videos like these to be very helpful.
It's been several months since the arrival of my freeze dryer, which Harvest Right Delivery strongly encourages all customers to fully inspect your freeze dryer and accessories to ensure that you only receive products in the best condition that pass not only their inspection, but yours. Now, my family went with the medium size, and you'll receive photographic user guides written in plain English that make understanding the full capacity of your freeze dryer very approachable. Here's my dad attaching the cap to the oil pump, which rarely needs to be topped off because it easily runs clear for 25 or more loads. I initially set my freeze dryer in our dining room, then moved it to our basement because the second floor of my townhouse is our primary living space, and I just had a tad more room in our basement. In a previous video that I'll link to, I showed how being able to freeze dry entire meals like cheesy chicken and veggie casseroles that come out looking as vibrant as this without the questionable chemical preservatives industrial food companies are putting in our food is a feeling of peace of mind that you can hardly buy. But if you make your food from scratch like we do, you realize that you don't need to rely on diminished quality store-bought food to create convenience. And oh, in that video, I shared how I rehydrated this meal, which came back as good as when I first made it. Now I can easily make larger batches of lasagna, knowing that I can save on freezer space. And believe it or not, I take our freeze-dried foods on family trips and keep a stash of food in my desk drawers at work. There's not a limit to what you can't use your freeze dryer for. The sale that I caught on an entire box of berries was incredible, and while some of this was immediately used to make fruit jams, keeping them in their whole form would give me even more versatility for recipes. The medium freeze dryer comes with 5 heavy-duty stainless steel trays that are 18 inches long and 7.5 inches wide, a size that easily fits into your regular kitchen freezer for pre-freezing. Now you have options when it comes to freezing your berries to cut down on the dry time. You can just slice your fruit in half, but I was multitasking in the kitchen, y'all, and I decided just not to do that this time. I also opted not to wash my berries on the front end because they are organic and pre-washed, and I was just pressed for time, but it's always a good idea to ensure that you're starting with rinse and dried food. The idea is that you want to have a flat layer of whatever you place on your trays and ensure that you give things a bit of wiggle room so that you have some airflow on your trays. Now, I did the same with the blackberries and blueberries, and you are going to be stunned at the before and after of freeze-dried fruit and not be able to tell the difference between the before and after that I'm about to show you. I did rinse and drain my strawberries, and now I'm just cutting off the tops and hollowing out the center so that I can slice them and place them on the trays as well. A few minutes later, here's what I've got. Full trays of fresh, in-season fruit that will soon be shelf-stable with nutrients and taste intact. Let's move these to the freeze dryer. All right, we're back about 12 hours later. I told you you'd be hard-pressed to tell the difference whether this is fresh or freeze-dried, because other than the touch, which is dry, firm, and crisp, you wouldn't know. Take a listen. Now that I've got these freeze-dried, I'm going to store them in half-gallon glass jars. Now you can absolutely use the freeze dryer Mylar bags, and I've got a supply of those stashed away too, But since I'm an avid canner and fermenter, I've already got a pretty sizable jar collection, and your jars are reusable. So storing my food in them is usually just my preference, and then I'll do a smaller stash so that I do have a lightweight option for camping, traveling, or mailing using my Mylar bags. Now, would you take a look at these strawberries? Similarly, they are dry and crisp, and goodness, these can become whatever I need them to be later this fall and winter. So I'm just going to scoop them into another half-gallon jar as well. Now, these jars will be stored in my unfinished basement that stays both cool and dark, which is why glass jars are another good option for me because you don't want to keep your freeze-dried food exposed to light or heat. And up next are these blueberries. They look just as plump as when I initially put them on the tray. And finally, here are the raspberries. By the way, Harvest Right has silicone sheets that are cut to size for your trays. I just haven't gotten my hands on them yet. But since the trays are stainless steel, you can't stain them, but the silicone liners would give you the option to make removal even that much easier. But as you can see here, I'm not really having any issues with that. You can also use parchment paper, and that's something that you probably already have. Let's take a look inside our beautiful jars filled with freeze-dried foods. All right, y'all, I love the simplicity of using a vacuum seal food lid with a simple hand tool called a brake bleeder. Yes, like the one you use for your vehicles, to remove the air from my jars. It gives me a PSI number that I can both watch and feel build the appropriate pressure. And this thing was like 20 bucks, and I've had it for over 6 years versus buying the electronic pump machine. You just want to pump until you get a number between 15 to 20 PSI, or you just can't pump it anymore. And yeah, that's how I seal my jars. So let's finish sealing the rest of them. I mean, truly, storing your own fresh fruit doesn't have to require hours of hands-on time, and freeze drying really frees your time to easily fit preservation into your routine. My favorite way to save money on meat is to get the reduced for quick sale meats that are marked 40% off or more at the grocery store. And this isn't meat that has expired, but it's marked down because the store simply needs to make room for the fresher inventory on their limited fridge case racks. Now, I want you to watch the results that I get from freeze drying raw chicken, lightly seasoned cooked chicken, fully cooked turkey meatballs, cocktail sausages, and pork chops. I didn't need to find room in my limited freezer space because these meats went straight into the freeze dryer and will be shelf stable and ready to turn into anything I need them to be a week, month, year, 2, or 20 from now. Here's the fully cooked chicken strips that I decided to go back and cube. It is so lightweight, almost like styrofoam, but it's got great color and is fully dried and crisp. See? I also love having a chicken product that doesn't have fillers, and I don't have to worry about it getting freezer burnt because the shelf life is 15 to 20 years, something I'm still wrapping my head around. But since I pressure can food and regularly cook with the food that I preserved 3, 4, and sometimes 5 years beforehand, I love knowing that none of my food is going to waste. Take a look at these meatballs. They are super crisp and crumbly. I'm putting them in a jar to store long term, but in a minute I'm going to show you how all of these meats, including the cocktail sausages, rehydrate when you go back to cook with them, so stay posted. At the Homesteaders of America conference, the vendor gave me this vacuum sealer kit because she shared how she notices that I use a brake pleater in my videos. Now, I was initially skeptical, but y'all, I'm several months into using this, and I believe that it's another great manual tool option to suck the air out of your jars. Now, while you don't get a PSI reading like you do with the brake pleater, you do feel the resistance build up as your jar tightens. I have a link to 4Jars, which already has the best canning lids on the market in the description box below, and you can use my code FARMGIRL10 to take 10% off your order. I just love the look of my preserved food in jars. And by the way, I used this half-gallon jar for my raw chicken because I was freezing another batch the following day. All right, so it's a few weeks later and I'm going back to unseal these jars. And what I'm going to do is use glass cups so that you can see how the meats that we preserved rehydrate. I cannot wait to show you this. First, let's go ahead and we're going to add some boiling water just for my kettle. Now, the rehydration time can range between several minutes to 15 or 20, depending on quantity and density. So here's the seasoned and fully cooked chicken that rehydrated in about 4 minutes. And what you're going to see me do is squeeze it to show that it has retained its juicy moisture and buoyancy. Now take a look as I shred it with my hands. Again, could you tell this was freeze-dried just a few minutes ago? My answer would be no. This meat is ready for a chicken salad. This chicken retained great chew and the seasoning taste that I had added. I am more than pleased. All right, so these are the turkey meatballs, which were already partially cooked, so they rehydrated super fast. They retain their shape and look at that springy bounce back for that incredible chew. These balls are ready for spaghetti. Now I want you to take a look at how tender a cut with a knife is. Oh my goodness, do you see that give? And more impressively, how it will stick to your fork. Who knew these meatballs were rock hard and on a shelf a moment ago? Here are the cocktail sausages, which I love throwing in the crock pot and smothering in barbecue sauce and then topping with kraut. The skin looks a bit wrinkly, but they retain their firm texture and have great chew. I'd say we're winning on all fronts here. Okay, now let's get to the raw, uncooked chicken. How did it turn out? Well, it was the longest to rehydrate, closer to about 15 minutes. But once rehydration was complete, here's what I got. Chicken that was tender, juicy, yet still firm with good fork texture. So there you have it. The results I'm getting going from this meat in jars to this, a plate of rehydrated meats. I'd say things are looking pretty good and is certainly easy for anyone to do.
If this is our first time meeting, hi, I'm Cassandra from the blog becomingaffarmgirl.com, and I'm here to help you create a useful and nutritious pantry. And I'm a woman that's convinced that preservation techniques like canning, fermenting, dehydrating, and freeze drying is the fastest and most reliable way to build a healthy food source. And that's because you own the means of production and you don't have to outsource that to a company.
Now, would you look at this beautiful basket of ripe peaches that I got for half off at the farmer's market? Because, well, they're called seconds, and it just means that the fruit is at the peak point of ripeness, and if not used quickly, may spoil within the next few days of purchase. So all I did is just slice them and freeze dry them, and by the following day, I was putting diced peaches in jars. Other seasonal fruits I freeze-dried include pineapples, and let me tell you, the sweetness of the sugars were just as aromatic before freeze-drying as they were afterwards. And the taste, well, freeze-dried fruit is known for how delicious it captures flavors, so I can assure you that it's spot on if you ever had the chance to try freeze-dried fruit. I went on to create combination platters of freeze-dried mango, kiwi, and pineapple, which I intend to use for smoothies, syrups, and create my own tea blends with. It is very hard to find flavored hot or iced tea that actually includes real fruit flavor, like actually only using food-based flavorings instead of synthetic ones, even at health stores. So I love being able to have my own at the ready to toss into chewy granola bars, oatmeal energy breakfast bites, trail mix, and more. Oh, now these are some ripe pears that I freeze-dried to make my own pear and ginger tea. I keep a small apothecary full of loose leaf teas, and I can't wait to make a pear, ginger, and green tea blend. Oh, so delicious. All right, so here's the pineapple, and then we've got the mango. And here are the very juicy and sweet pears. All right, you know my routine. Now it's time to vacuum seal everything. Even though I live in a townhouse, I grow a lot of leafy greens and fresh herbs in my green stalk vertical planters. And for almost half the year, I've got some type of seasonal herb that's growing from herbs that I've planted years ago at this point, but they come back each year and some are cut and come again even throughout the season. And this means that I am always swimming in fresh herbs. Trust me, it's a good problem to have. And since nearly all the meals I eat are cooked from home, I've gotten used to the taste of fresh herbs. It's a vibrancy that doesn't come close to bulk herbs that may have been sitting for who knows how long or not stored in the best conditions. Regular dehydrating is absolutely an option, but some herbs that have more volatile oils lose their taste dramatically, but not when you freeze dry them. Whoa, it suspends all that flavor and a taste payout you'll appreciate. All right, I've got parsley, boxwood basil, chives, peppermint, rosemary, and lemon balm. Oh, I forage when I'm out on trail walks, and this morning I came back with plantain, also known as plantago, which is a perennial plant that is used to treat, well, a range of conditions, including things like skin issues, respiratory and digestive issues, as well as things like infections, pains, or for fevers. It contains a lot of active compounds, including flavonoids, polysaccharides, and better yet, is free if you know where to find it and what it looks like. So I'm just prepping it right now by giving it a good cleaning. And while I'm going to tincture some fresh, I also enjoy it in a dried form to use as tea or in salves for skincare. The same is true for this lemongrass that I also foraged. Its volatile oils can easily diminish with regular dehydrating, but freeze drying locks those compounds in place. Fresh lemongrass tea is pricey per pound at the store, but there are hedges of it growing at this out of the way spot where I like to walk my dog. So I'm building my stash for this winter. And oh, I had also found some yarrow on this particular day, which is another highly medicinal herb that I wanted to go ahead and dry to have on hand for yarrow tea. Now, the flower, stem, and the leaves each have healing properties that address a lot of cold and flu, inflammation, and wound healing problems, so it is great to have on hand. I think that if you're on the fence about your freeze dryer, one tip I like to give is to determine before you buy it how your freeze dryer is going to fit into existing preparedness or preservation routines that you already have in place but would like to augment. So, as you know, I forage a decent amount of herbs that I use as part of our overall health and wellness or to treat a quick cold, ache, or pain, and to make body care products like body wash, toothpaste, mouthwash, and body butters. So I find being able to freeze dry herbs that would easily cost me upwards of $18 a pound is another way, among many, that I can not only avoid that cost and source what I need without relying on companies changing prices or availability. All right, we've got plantain, lemongrass, yarrow, mullein, and some more plantain. And as I shared earlier, I'm going to use my glass canning jars to store my herbs because those jars are just going to sit in a black cupboard in my apothecary or be stored in the basement, which stays cool and dark on a shelf. So, all right, I want to circle back to the quality component that you can't see but is proven in tests. So freeze drying retains about 97% of nutrients, while dehydrating retains only about 60 to 75. And this is because, and I quote, the solid state of water during freeze drying also protects the primary structure and the shape of the products with minimal volume reduction. In addition, the lower temperature in the process allows maximal nutrient and bioactive compound retention. And being able to minimally process nutritive items that actually give maximum nutrients is very important to me and my family because so much of our food is already in a reduced state of its nutritional potential due to reduced soil quality. And so I see that that is a value that I get with the freeze dryer. Convenience, heck yeah, but that was a bonus because deep nutrition is what heals and fuels the body. And that was an even more significant factor in our decision to get a freeze dryer. I cannot tell you how tickled I am to be building my apothecary with premium wild herbs. Now, keep in mind that this is what I completed from just one longer walk on the weekend. And after a few sessions, your stock really begins to grow.
All right, so I've showed you all that, but the question still remains, is a freeze dryer for you? Well, it depends, but that's why I want to give you some food for thought, and I think that you'll find what I have to say to be very honest. Now, this might be a little shocker for you, but my favorite way to preserve foods has been and will always be canning. Yeah, so water bath canning or pressure canning. There is just something about creating a meal that I'm going to can over the stove and then spoon it into the jars, and I think every food preservationist has a method that they're just primarily drawn to. But what I can share with you is someone that's been canning for, well, almost a decade now, who started off with canning, then I moved into fermentation and dehydrating, and I have rotated that skill set for, goodness, the past 9 years, because it's just been about almost a year that I've had my freeze dryer. And during that time, I've been able to refine how much I'm able to kind of put away each year. So I'm not only canning for my household here, but also for my parents. And so one of the things that I inevitably will hit each year, since I only kind of do my preservation as those items are in season, is quite frankly the time. I work outside of my home, and that's what I like to share here on the channel. I truly have shared how I do lots of small batch canning, but there's only so much that you can systematize or operationalize before you just don't have time to get the volume that you would prefer. And the one thing that I have realized, because when I scale out, and I know that having a source of food that I know what ingredients both are and are not within that product, and how I'm able to like preserve those nutrients and customize the taste, that I had reached a point where I know that I have a preference for certain foods that are pressure canned. That some foods I like pressure canned, I don't enjoy them fermented, but some fermented foods I only want them to be dehydrated. And so I would say that when you think about preservation, you are not always going to have one particular method that satisfies how you or your family prefers that particular meal. So that was one kind of issue that I was thinking about. And then also the time where I couldn't fit in any more kind of canning sessions during the week or the weekends. And so that's where I found being able to keep up with the production that I prefer, to have a device that isn't as laborious as, that sounds really bad, because canning, yes, it is an act of love, but definitely it does take time. It is more hands-on. But with freeze drying, it's so easy because I can be here in the kitchen preparing food, pressure canning, all of that, and also be able to still buy the different quantities of food that are either, on sale or I caught on clearance or at a reduced price, and just put them in the freeze dryer and not think about it, or have them in the freezer, take them, out, and then just run several batches in my freeze dryer. And I don't think that this option is one that should be overlooked, because I have a really good friend who has been wanting to get into canning for the longest time, but she also has 3 littles. She's a homeschooling mama, and for her, she said, you know what, like Cassandra, I really want to do like all of the canning, but I need something where my attention is so diverted most of the time that for me, at this time, it makes better sense for me to be able to say, hey, I can still kind of stockpile these items by having a freeze dryer. And I think that that's something where we have to just assess, again, your lifestyle preference. I know that I just love the act of food preparation, being hands-on. However, I will say that having a freeze dryer will either be it provides you with just a little bit of a relief if you're already someone like me who is doing multiple food preservation methods, or if you're someone that wants to get into being able to preserve your own food, but you're not yet in a particular spot where you can be as hands-on with some of the other food preservation methods. Something else that I think is important to consider when you're in the freeze dryer market is to think about what your intention for using this piece of machinery is. And so for me, not only was it an option that I had to be able to have a higher output without trying to find extra time, which I had simply maxed out on, but for me personally, I do a lot of foraging for like medicinal herbs, and it is very important how I store these herbs that I'm gathering. And so when I looked into the freeze drying versus dehydrating, which is a method that I, again, continue to use, there are differences in terms of the potency and the volatile kind of oils that are preserved and how long they're preserved, and how quickly sometimes they will diminish in the dehydrated form just because the processes are very different. And so for me, being able to have a better option of some of these herbs that I am foraging, or also, just growing in my backyard, even for just culinary purposes, but also because I've really been intentional about my apothecary for the past 2.5 years. And so when I thought about how I wanted to store these items long term to also have that stockpile, it just absolutely made sense. And what I can tell you is that, the price of herbs is, even like your bulk herbs, is something that you're going to pay, a pretty penny for if you are really looking for quality, which is obviously, what you want. But I can absolutely tell you that across a season, especially as you become very familiar with your bioregion, that I am able to preserve literally like hundreds of dollars worth of herbs in my apothecary. And so when I think about the cost and how I'm recouping the initial kind of investment that you put into your machine, I know that I am getting a return. When I make my tinctures, when I make, my different blends or supplements, and I'm getting a quality product that I no longer have to feel, I'm paying one price this month and then it's going up and then it's out of stock. And so I think being able to have this piece of equipment in my home, where again, I have the means of production right there, has not only given me peace of mind, but then I'm also able to have a product that I know, when it was picked and harvested, that it's being preserved in the best kind of possible way for when I do go to use it. And if you are someone who is also a forager, or you have, you're growing lots of, herbs for culinary purposes, that there's definitely a taste difference with some of the herbs. Not all of them. There's some that, can go either way. But I have definitely found that to be a added benefit. Another thing to consider if a freeze dryer may be right for you is if you are someone who comes into having, a glut of food. And so I'll say this, because this is where it kind of really made sense. And I, for this purchase, needed to see that there were multiple reasons for me to kind of get this. So as some of y'all know, I've been learning how to hunt for just the past year. And I cannot tell you how helpful and the peace of mind that I have now when harvesting a deer or a doe for either me or one of my friends, being able to know, okay, I have options for how I'm going to go ahead and, allocate all of this. Some of it's going to go to the freezer. Some of it I'm going to dehydrate. I can, freeze dry this for now, because all of the preservation sources that I have around my house, I'm definitely ramping up. And so that's where it really just started to make sense for me, because I am just working in this tiny townhouse kitchen, but the output now of what I'm able to do with food that I'm able to glean or is shared with me is so awesome. I also want to share that anytime my husband and I are traveling, either together with my family or even day trips, y'all know that I am always packing our food. I always have food from home for a number of reasons, right? Number one, it's just cost effective, right? And number two, there are so few places that you can go when you're, out and about and you're not familiar with the culinary landscape. Especially, we're being really intentional around avoiding, seed oils and just other questionable, things that are in food. And the only way to do that is to make sure that you have food that's always at the ready. And the portability of having freeze-dried foods, it's just, amazing. And I have really appreciated that this year multiple times when we've done just family, trips or getting together, or even at work, because I will take my freeze-dried food. It doesn't need refrigeration. It's easy to store. It heats up, quickly. It's delicious when it's reheated. Or even just traveling. Yes, I still will take several kind of bags of my glass jars and coolers. However, I also now have the option to take something that's just, lighter and not as cumbersome. And I like that I have options for both. Okay, this is me much later. I think I said deer and doe when I meant to say buck or doe. So even after all that, I know that there are plenty of people that say, Cassandra, I don't can or ferment, I only freeze dry. And you know what? That's why I think you really have to consider how you like to spend your time in the kitchen and really what makes sense for your lifestyle. Now, honey, I like to put up a lot of food, but one thing that I don't like is having a kitchen where I'm overwhelmed by appliances. And so I consider for sure the freeze dryer to be a boutique item because other than that, I just have, a fridge, freezer. I have another freezer that's downstairs. I have my canner. I have my KitchenAid back here that I thrifted. Y'all know that a couple of years ago. And then everything else are pretty much hand tools for me. And I just keep it simple, right? Because it's so easy to get overwhelmed by everything. And I just think the build is better, yada, yada, that kind of thing. So, but I will absolutely say that in terms of my goal of being able to capture food where I know it's been sourced from either, a farmer's market or one of my friends' gardens, or from another source that I have already vetted, that is so important to me, and freeze drying has definitely opened up our options, ones that I feel good about the ingredients and the source at the ready. I know with the results that I'm getting, I'm only going to continue to use my freeze dryer more and more. Now, I cook a lot from scratch, so being able to have a device that allows me to preserve a number of different options, the versatility that you have with your freeze dryer really opens up things in a way that, canning is more specific to these certain types of foods, or, dehydrating, that kind of thing, has really just enabled me to have a very robust kind of comprehensive plan for every single item that I could possibly, bring into my home. I also want to name that when I think about, so I'm a homestead dreamer that still works full-time outside of our house, and we're going to get to the farm eventually, and we're saving for it and all of that. And so what made sense now, since we've really been spending the time that we're here in our townhome to develop these kind of foundational skills, is that I know that it was a purchase that I wanted to make after I had evidence just in our own home of being able to shop seasonally, of being able to integrate preserved foods into, our daily meal planning, and we're definitely there. But it was also a purchase that I wanted to make on the front end before we get to our homestead, because then financially, of course, we'll be prioritizing, the projects that we'll need to get into while we're there. And so having the freeze dryer now really just made sense when I think about the timeline of pieces of equipment that I will, want, and absolutely has made sense. And I do enjoy freeze drying because it's so simple. In fact, it's too simple. It's almost anticlimactic. You see the food, you put it on the tray, you walk away. And you know what? Sometimes during a busy work week or weekend, things need to be that simple. To get more food preservation inspiration, click on the video on your screen. I'll see you in my kitchen or garden soon. Take care, friends.